You can spot me in the city building lobby with a sword off shotty screaming, drop it, this a robbery.
What's up, my people? This is ShowBizz the adult. Who will win in a fight between the Brown Bomber Joe Louis and the real deal Evander Holyfield? Let's break this fight down. Both of those guys were, smaller heavyweights, which, for me, bigger isn't better, especially now. I mean, bigger could be worse. Bigger feels like worse to me. I wanted to put those two guys together. Evander Holyfield, what was he? On average, probably about 208, something like that, 210. And then you have Joe Louis, who floats around the same size. They was around the same height, too. I think Joe Louis was like 6'2". I think Evander was somewhere around there, 6'1", 6'2". Evander Holyfield was a busy fighter, right? Evander Holyfield was always on his toes. He stayed on his toes, and he bounced forward and backwards. And because he did that, because he would shoot the jab, and he would shoot the hook, but what he was doing was he was baiting you in so he could counter. He did that a few times. He did that against Buster Douglas. So he baited him in, and boom, right? That's what he did. He did that with Iron Mike Tyson. It was an older Evander Holyfield, but still, he was hopping back, bam, same thing. So that was one of his things, where he'd trade, he'd engage with you, but he was a slugger, but boxer. He was very calculated. He liked to hook off the jab, his left hook, he threw the left hook constantly, right? If you look at him against the white Muhammad Ali, he was throwing them hooks, right? And even Burt Cooper, he was doing the same thing. So Evander Holyfield, he was a busy fighter, and he was always setting you up for the counter. Another thing Holyfield did was, and I thought was very smart, that made him a warrior, it wasn't just his heart, it was his brain. The fact that when you land a punch on him, a clean shot, he returned with it. He almost used his chin as a counter. Okay, because he had he has one of the greatest chins of all time. So here, if you land a good shot on him, he's going to land 4 or 5 on you. Okay, that's basically how he beat George Foreman. And forget what anyone has to say. The second George Foreman that came back, the older George Foreman, was as fierce as the younger one. He was knocking everybody out. But he couldn't drop Evander Holyfield. Number one, Evander Holyfield had a huge heart, a big chin. But number two, he knew when he landed on Holyfield was going to return with like 6, 7, or 8. I think he threw like a 17-punch combination on George Foreman. He was just letting his punches rip on George Foreman. So that was Evander Holyfield. He had heart. He knew how to slug, when to slug. But he was also a boxer who stayed on his toes, who could stay on his toes for 12 rounds. And I'm talking about the prime Evander Holyfield. Once his hair started thinning and he cut his head bald, he was already on the downslide, though he was still a legend. Now, Joe Louis. Joe Louis was a technician. He was a mechanical, highly skilled, excellent boxer. He's one of the greatest of all times. And what he would do was he would paw with the jab. It was a nice jab. And he kept himself extremely thin. And he would parry with this right hand he had. So he'll parry with that, and he'll hook off of it sometimes. He'll pull you in too with the parry, and he'll hook off of it. Also, he can throw the right hand and knock you out with very little distance. He has so much power in a small space where he can hit you and duck and hit you right on the chin. Here's some of the things from Joe Louis where he'll parry with that right hand. Hey man, I'm making a video. Let me call you back. So he would parry that. He'd catch you with the right hand, and he'll pull that left hook. And like I said, he was one of the hardest punchers, pound for pound ever. So he punched correctly. The way he turned his hips, the way he turned his straight and turned his wrist in a very small space, and that's what he wanted, a very small space. Also, he hunted you down. With just a step. He's stepping into you. He's staying thin, and he was very hard to hit. You were hitting him, but not solid, because he kept his shoulder high, and he'll paw and he'll move. And just like all those guys, Jersey Joe Walcott, Archie Moore, the Mongoose, those guys, he was just like them. It was like a style there, and it was kind of like, he hid behind a shell, right? So I think those two guys, I think it's an awesome matchup between the two. And this is how I think it would go. I think Evander Holyfield would definitely be busy with the jab. And I think that would kind of stymie a little bit Joe Louis, okay? Now, Joe Louis would try to jab under it or maybe jab on top of it, but he'll be catching Holyfield's jab. I think it was stymieing him a little bit on how to get in a little bit closer because Holyfield is bouncing, like I said, he's on his toes, and Joe Louis didn't have that type of movement. But it wouldn't affect him too much when it comes to the punches that's being landed on him because Holyfield wasn't that hard of a puncher. He wasn't a devastating puncher, though he had good knockouts. It was due to his accuracy and due to his combinations, okay? So I see Joe Louis kind of pawing in, maybe getting stymied a little bit, and with Holyfield's work rate, he's kind of winning these rounds, all right? But Holyfield is going to trade with you. And when that happens, I think that is all towards Joe Louis's benefit because Joe Louis does have a reach, but it doesn't take much for him to knock you out. It doesn't take much space. So, like I said, Holyfield was heavy with that left hook. If you look at Holyfield against Burt Cooper, if you look at Holyfield, it's an old Holyfield, but him against James Toney, I'm just saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. He's going to throw that left hook, and he always threw it too high. And I think that's going to work in Joe Louis's benefit when he's throwing it and Joe Louis is ducking and hitting him with the right hand. I think Joe Louis is going to be countering Holyfield very often, and Joe Louis is going to counter him with some thunderous shots. It doesn't look like much because he's throwing it perfectly, but the dude had heavy hands, and I see it hurting Holyfield, and I see over time, I see it being a war. It's being definitely a war. I think mechanically it goes to Joe Louis's favor because I see Holyfield missing a lot and I see Joe Louis landing some thunderous shots. Now here is where Holyfield has a very good chance. If Holyfield knows it's coming. If Holyfield's been throwing the hook, throwing the jab, and he knows that Joe Louis is parrying and Joe Louis is trying to counter with that right hand and Holyfield drops back like he does and hit him with that right hand and then start throwing combinations, that could really hurt Joe Louis. I've seen Joe Louis knocked out by Max Schmeling, okay? So I think with combinations, that can pop Joe Louis off. But the thing about Joe Louis is he's so mechanical that, it's going to be hot in there. It's going to be hot in there. Joe Louis has a chin, but Joe Louis's chin isn't like Holyfield's. But Joe Louis's power is greater than Holyfield's. That fight is amazing. 2 out of 3 times, I'm going to give it to Evander Holyfield. I know that may not be the popular call, and I know Evander Holyfield is my favorite heavyweight ever, so that may have something to do with it. But 2 out of the 3 fights I would give to Evander Holyfield. I give the very first fight though to Joe Louis. If it comes down to one fight, the first fight, I'm giving it to Joe Louis. But I see Evander Holyfield actually learning from that first fight and taking the next 2. What's going to go in Joe Louis's favor is that Evander Holyfield loves wars, and he's going to make it into a war. But the fact that Joe Louis is so mechanically sound and can hit so hard, that may wear down Holyfield over time. He ain't knocking Holyfield out though. So comment below, let me know what you think, make some compelling arguments. This is a great debate. I'm very interested in hearing how you guys feel about this, what your take is on this bout. It's a fantasy fight. We'll never see the fight. No one would ever be 100% accurate, but I love fantasy fights, and it's always fun to talk some boxing with my educated community who has a lot to say. And look, I've learned from a lot of my other videos that you guys got a lot to say, and it's just awesome stuff, and I'm learning all the time, even reading my comments. So comment below, let me know what you think. ShowBizz the adult. I'm out.
Spot me in the city, building lobby with a sawed-off shot. He screaming, drop it, it's a robbery.